You know, Bugsy Siegel gets a lot of credit for being the guy who invented Las Vegas. Well, that's not true. Las Vegas had been there decades before he showed up. It was a hot spot for cowboys, the local folk. It was rural, but there are other people who deserve a lot more credit. One of them is Moe Dalitz. You know, Dalitz made sure Las Vegas had paved streets, water, schools. He went to the bosses of the mobs and he said, look, if you want this place to succeed and not turn into another Havana, which people stopped going to because Havana was dangerous, it was dirty, it was too far away. He said, look, let's build this place up. Make sure they have good schools. That way we'll get good employees and not these people who don't understand what gambling is. We'll get people here from New York and from Los Angeles. So Dallas deserves a lot of that credit. And the other guy who was almost unheard of, unfortunately, is Tony Cornero, Tony the Hat. Cornero, I think, means rabbit. It does in Spanish. Anyway, Tony Cornero. He built Las Vegas as we pretty much knowing it today. Fittingly, he died there. He, true to Las Vegas style, he dropped dead at the gambling tables at the Desert Inn, which is gone now. He had gone to the Desert Inn. He wanted a last chance meeting with Moe Dalitz. He wanted to beg he wanted him, Dalitz, to beg the mob guys for more money to help him finance the complete construction of his casino, the cursed Stardust Hotel. Something I know a lot about. What a story behind it. Someone should just write a book about the Stardust Hotel only. It's a good story. Look it up someday. Anyway, the place was scheduled to open in just 2 weeks, July 13, 1955. It was going to be the biggest hotel in the Strip, 500 rooms, and people were sitting around wondering, what was this guy thinking? 500 rooms? How will we ever fill 500 rooms? But Cornero didn't have the cash. He didn't to pay his staff. He couldn't supply the house tables. He was in trouble. He was in over his head. Everybody knew it. He was in the hole to the mob apparently for $6 million, and he had already borrowed to finance the Stardust, and he couldn't account for a lot of that cash. It went missing. It was a mistake to give him the money in the first place. He was no businessman. He was what they called in those days a dice jockey with high ambitions. He was a smart man. I mean, he wasn't an incompetent, but maybe he had bitten off a bit more this time than he could have chewed. He did meet with Dalitz for several hours. There was a conference. It really went nowhere. Cornero wanted more money from the mob, and the mob just said, "Pay us what you owe us. Show us something, and we can talk." And he couldn't show him anything. So during a break in this meeting, Cornero goes out onto the floor, goes to the crap tables, has a drink, goes into the hole for 10 grand. A waitress came over, insult to injury, and hands him a bill for $25 for the food and drinks he'd had. And he's livid. He's pissed off. He had been invited there for a meeting, and he started screaming and yelling. He said, "I'm a guest at this hotel. Moe Dalitz told me to come." The waitress says, "What do you want from me? Just give me the $25. At that point, he grabs his chest, and he falls dead on the floor. So what are you going to do? Anyway, he had, by the way, the dice in his hands when he died. Isn't that something? So then this asinine story started, by the way, that the drink was poisoned. I don't think so. Anyway, if he was poisoned, that went with him. We'll never know. There was no autopsy done. People looked for mystery in that too. The body was shipped off to Las Vegas. By the way, as the body went out, this isn't funny, but as the body went out through the front door of the casino, they had an organist, and he knocked off a rendition of Tony's favorite song, the Wabash Cannonball. And within 8 hours after he hit the floor, he was gone, buried. Anyway, nobody checked the contents of that 7-7 he'd been sipping. No one really cared, at that point. The important thing is, for a lot of people in Vegas, he was dead. Jake the Barber Factor, John Factor, Chicago's favorite dope, was put in a position as the new owner of record, and when they realized that he had a criminal record, they took it away from him and gave it to his wife Rella, and they said, "You're now the casino owner." And anyway, everybody was apparently happy, everybody except Tony, of course. He had probably been set up from the very beginning. He never would have gotten a license to run the place. He had a long criminal record as a gambler. He wasn't a stick-up artist or something, but they weren't going to hand him a license, you know. And he had a lot of political enemies, and having a political enemy in Vegas, not good. You know, the state was a seemingly smaller place in those days, and these old families ran things, and this Cornero came in. It just didn't work out for him. Anyway, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, that were positive he would never attract enough gamblers to fill all those rooms. All he would do by building this casino, the Stardust, which in their view reduce prices at all the other casinos and run the place into reduce prices and it caused a glut on what was then a pretty small market. So Cornero knew about his licensing problem. He didn't seem concerned about it. He said, this is his quote, "A few million goes a long way in Nevada." And in 1950s, that was very true. But the word was Moe Dalitz already taken care of it, that the mob didn't want him to have his license, and so it wasn't going to happen. Anyway, so he's entered talks. The bills he was expected to pay, by the way, were starting off at $500,000 a month. That's what he would need the first 3 months of business. He didn't have that. So while it lasted, he did have an amazing life. He was born Anthony Cornero Strada in an Italian village near the Swiss border in 1895. The family was well off. They had a large farm. The father apparently lost it in a card game, lost his farm in a card game. Then more bad luck comes. Tony Cornero accidentally, I don't know, there's another side to the story, set fire to the family's harvest. He drove them broke, forcing them to emigrate to San Francisco in around 1900. The other story on that is that he had apparently through his life a habit of setting fires. He was, there's some name for that, but it's a mental illness. But anyway, he eventually, at age 16, he's in San Francisco. He pleads guilty to robbery, does 10 months in reform school. He racks up 10 more arrests in 10 years, including 3 for bootlegging and 3 for attempted murder. I'm wrong. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'd forgotten about that. So attempted murder was in there. He was ambitious, and by late 1922, he's driving a cab, and then he decides, I'm going to branch off. Why not, if I'm driving anyway, why not run rum from Mexico and Canada into the U.S.? He did that. He got enough money. He bought a string of small boats, and he smuggled whiskey in from Canada, and he sold it to the better clubs in L.A., and he made, of course, it was almost all profit. He also had, as I said, income from Mexico as well. In Mexico, he used freighters because more food and so forth was coming in. And the Coast Guard just didn't check freighters at the time. Anyway, Tony purchases this ship, the SS Lily. He stocked it. He's got a lot of money now. So it's the end of Prohibition. He's really got some cash rolling in. He buys this ship. It's a big ship, merchant ship, the SS Lily. Puts 4,000 cases of booze in it, the best booze money can buy. And he has these trips, gambling trips. You can get on the boat. He puts his casinos, everything on the boat, and you can get in there and gamble. He took that money and he went out to Las Vegas with his brothers, and he opened the town's first very large casino, the Green Meadows, which is known for its attractive staff. You can read between the lines. It says, which was known for its, this is an FBI report, for its staff, attractive and friendly waitresses. So figure out what that means. The Meadows turned a small profit, but a healthy profit. And Cornero he started to reinvest in casinos in other states. But mostly he stayed in Vegas. And when the money starts to pour in, the guys in New York, Luciano, Lansky, Costello, Frank Costello, they sent representatives around. They said, look, we need a cut here. I'm sorry, that's how it goes. But he'd always operated on the fringe of the national syndicate. And he said, no, I'm not paying you. Build your own casino. And they leaned on him a little bit. And they had a powerful presence on the West Coast at that point. Chicago was there. New York was certainly operating on the West Coast. And there was the West Coast Mafia as well. Anyway, long story short, somebody burned the Green Meadows down to the ground. Realizing he could never win, he sold out everything he had in Nevada. He goes back to L.A. It's now 1938. He buys several large ships, completely refurbishes them, the inside. Outside, he had them stay as what they were. He wanted them to look bad on the outside. But inside, it was pure luxury. He put $300,000 into these boats. It was a lot of money in 1938. And he anchors them 3 miles off the coast of Santa Monica. And he has the gamblers shuttled back and forth. For those of you too young to remember, I remember when I was a boy, in New England, you could see the Russian subs occasionally, and you could see Russian, what they call trawlers fishing, but listening posts. It was 3 miles. That was the rule. I think now we've pushed it out considerably more, like everyone else in the world has finally done. Anyway, his lead ship, the gamblers were put into these motorboats that went really fast. They pick them up to the dock, bring them out to the boat, and they could have a very good meal. There was dancing, there was gambling. It was a great idea. And then I don't know if they could sleep there or not, but then they'd bring the gamblers back to the shore. They made a fortune doing this thing. He was pulling in, one estimate, $300,000 a night, and that was after his expenses. The problem was he became the center of attention for the reform movement in Los Angeles County. At the early 30s, mid 30s, LA's getting a little bit seedy, and this is when you saw they started breathing later on life into what was called the gangster squad, to just take hoods as they pulled in on the train station, beat the bejesus out of them, throw them out of town. There was a lot going on. Prostitution was always big there in the early days in L.A., so they tried to clean it up. And the state's attorney general was Earl Warren. He ran the Warren Commission later on that looked into President Kennedy's assassination. He ordered a raid on the wrecks and a lot of other of Cornero's boats. The government, Cornero fought a series of battles. Cornero poured a lot of money into lawyers, and they argued the ships are operating in international waters, and the California government, Warren really, took the indefensible stand that they didn't care where the hell it was, it's still illegal. It's not really an argument, but it's what they wanted. It goes back and forth, so finally, after raiders, state policemen, had gotten on the boat and smashed most of the gambling equipment, wrecked the places, Cornero says, screw this, and he starts to fight back. So when the cops started to come out in the boats to claim on board his gambling ship, he has his guys repel them with water hoses. You ever see a water hose on a big boat? Powerful. I mean, you could kill a guy with one of those. And but he won. He won these things. One battle went on for 9 hours, and finally the cops just gave up. But anyway, once again, Cornero is beaten. He knows it. He closes up his ship operations. He tried to open a few gambling joints inside of L.A., but by then Mickey Cohen is now running things. He's the ruling bookie. He's the ruling dope dealer in town. He shut him down. He says, it's not going to happen. New York doesn't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. Leave. So Cornero, at first, he refuses to back down until somebody blew up a big part of his house. And he wasn't involved in the muscle-in. He just did the hell with it. He went back to Las Vegas. So he's there, and he starts to dream about this massive place called the Stardust he's going to build. It's going to be a world-class hotel. It's going to be styled after the European gambling casino hotels. He's got big dreams. Of the estimated $25 million he earned in his career as a gambler, now this is according to the government, when he died, he had about $800 on him when he died. Anyway, so that's the story of Tony Cornero. He's an interesting guy.